Tom, the start of the final week, treaty talks. The president of the committee saying that they met over the weekend, that he felt that progress had been made. What kind of progress are you hearing was made?
Actually, I'm hearing that very little progress was made over the weekend. They met until 2 o'clock in the morning Saturday, so it's really quite extraordinary. And he's under immense pressure to do something. You got to understand that for someone like the Ambassador Maritam from Argentina, that getting something out of here is his number one priority. This is his monument. This is what his legacy. So he's just desperate to get something out of here. I don't think he cares that much about substance anymore, but he wants something out. So he's going to kind of hold these people's feet to the fire.
And isn't that an indication when you say he doesn't really care what he gets, that this is what the UN, that's what it's been all about from the start? And you know, it's just like John Bolton said, in the hidden agenda is civilian firearms, and that's still very much the target. They can't agree on many other things, but that's still very much the target.
Very much the target, and Ambassador Bolton was absolutely right. They do have a hidden agenda. But I'm sometimes loath to say hidden, but it's very, very, very subtle. But this process continues on, and it has any type of opening or implied opening in there to take another shot at civilian firearms. They will. They're going to take a shot at civilian firearms at the end of August with the program of action. But it goes on and on and on, and that's what's so hard for people to understand. It's a very, very subtle process. It's not, what is this phrase, not with a bang, but a whimper.
But you know, they're talking about progress being made, and what do? They go back behind closed doors this morning with what the chairman called our friends, but there's no NGOs as far as their gun ownership friends being in there.
That's correct. The pro-gun NGO people are pretty much excluded. A lot of the anti-gun NGOs have people who are members of delegations, so they can get into these meetings. The UN is really a terrible example of how government should be, because it's totally untransparent. And if you don't have access to delegations, you really don't have access. The average citizen of the world, or of America, but of the world, can't really get in and watch how the UN operates. It's a totally closed environment.
Well, and I called them the president's gun ownership friends because he said everybody's important. But it's obvious when they go behind these closed doors that they don't have your organization. They don't have a representative from the NRA in these meetings. And that's what, again, is so concerning, is how it's all going to end up on Friday.
That an interesting thing happened as he closed the meeting today. He had a new proposal on what they call the preamble. And that proposal contained some language about civilian ownership. He just, one of his subcommittee chairs repeated. But then as the meeting was closed, the staff got up and they were going to distribute the written proposal to everybody in the room, including us. But then he said, no, only to the closed meeting. So we don't have in front of us what they're actually working on at this time. Another example of how closed the UN is. But a lot of these issues, but let's return to some other issues for a moment. There remains tremendous pressure on the issue of ammunition. We've learned that the United Kingdom is really leaning on the United States to change its position on ammunition. At the highest possible levels, they're exchanging telephone calls, that type of thing.
But Tom, you mentioned the preamble, and Wayne LaPierre from the NRA stood there a couple of weeks ago saying, if you think excluding civilian ownership and just putting it in the preamble is going to do, you're kidding yourselves. And he made that very, very clear. Have you any indication what they're going to put in the preamble when it comes to civilian ownership?
Well, that's the irony, is that I not only have no indication of what they're going to put in the preamble, I have no really indication whether or not they're going to put the good language in the operational sections of the treaty in the scope section or the implementation section. That's where it's a civilian exemption really needs to be. But here, today, the irony is we've been reduced to wondering, is there any good language in a place that doesn't count?
Yeah.
So, but the great danger to gun owners of the world is there'll be some language in the preamble that says, civilian possession is okay. That's totally inadequate, and we can't be bought off or co-opted by that language. We need real language in the operative sections of the treaty.
All right. So come Friday. You said the president of this committee is determined to get a treaty. Come Friday, what's going to happen in that room?
Well, Friday they've got to have a text by Friday. And that text will be attached to a report, which will go to the General Assembly. The General Assembly will pass it, and then it'll be open for signatures. But what will happen is it'll come down to some very, very contentious issues. That's what happens at all these conferences. And people, they'll go into private meeting, they'll go to public meeting, they'll go back and forth, they'll have consultations. And I suspect somewhere around 6 o'clock Saturday morning, they'll finally resolve something, or the conference will break up. If the conference breaks up without a report, they may go back to the General Assembly and try it again next summer.
Wow.
Who knows?
But it has to be done by consensus on Friday if they have a report.
That's right. There's always an outside extreme possibility that they might start to vote. If somebody moves for a vote, you can't stop a vote. But that's real suicide stuff around here.
So if it gets approved by consensus, now that's just the report. That's not the final document?
Well, the final document is attached to the report.
Okay.
But I mean, the guts of it is the treaty. I mean, let's not get into the formalism of report versus
gotcha.
annex. But that's where the treaty is going to reside. It goes from here to the General Assembly, actually the first committee of the General Assembly, first committee of the General Assembly sends it to the General Assembly, and then the General Assembly approves it, and then it's open for signature.
So when could we expect that President Obama would sign this treaty?
You could see President Obama signing this treaty in early November. Whether or not that's before the election or after the election is very, very interesting.
As things are going right now, before I let you go, your prediction, come Friday, they're going to have a treaty approved by consensus.
I think that a treaty will come out of here, and we as gun owners won't like it one iota.